Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement, and if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat."
All right, we're live. This is great. Mr. Bud, a.k.a. J. Bud, right? Freshman football coach, awesome guy, turned into very strict disciplinarian, right? Totally different guy, right?
A role that I had to play.
Yeah.
A role on a stage.
So funny story. I played freshman football and sophomore football. So practice with pads starts, right? I played D-line. Coach Smitty's the D-line coach. Obviously, you remember that. And he low-key walks up to you. I remember this like yesterday. And he's like, "I got two guys." And he said Dixon and another name. And obviously, I wasn't one of the names. And
Was it Galati?
No, and I was little. I mean, I'm 5'6" on a good day. And I was fucking pissed. I was pissed. So you probably remember. I ended up starting freshman year, D-line, and then got in a fight with a Mayfair kid, broke my hand, didn't finish the season. And then the start of JV year, broke my hand, didn't start the season. So, like, my career was over because, the good kids were already established, and, like, I just didn't have enough, I didn't have enough drive at that point to keep working to try to get my spot back. So I didn't play junior year, but I trained all offseason with Quarterman to play fullback and compete against Berzicki. And I started dating this really hot chick, and I didn't even try. That was my football career. And I played since I could walk. I played full since I could walk.
Girls in fighting have sunk a lot of ships over the years.
Yeah. I still remember our freshman year, Judge Ryan. You gave us the rah-rah speech, and you were so into it, dude.
Yeah.
You were so into it. I remember that like it was yesterday.
Those are strong memories that I have. Ironically, the football players, and particularly the football players who found their way to detention or jug or had issues at school. Those are the guys that I obviously spent the most time with at Father Judge, but also spend the most time with now and play a role in my life. And so I'm glad that you're in my life first and foremost, and that you're doing this thing. I'm so proud of you for what you're doing.
I appreciate it.
You've been through a couple of different things, and you've come out a stronger person on the other side.
Yeah.
And you're looking to do something positive with those trials and tribulations. And so it's just, I'm really proud to be on this because I'm really proud of you, and I'm humbled to be asked, but just very excited to be here and talk with you today.
Yeah, I mean, you and your wife you guys have been great always. And I think our relationship definitely blossomed from No Limit Gym. Prior to that, you were just Mr. Bud from Father Judge. And then we work out in the same spot for multiple years in a row. We kind of developed a relationship that just kind of grew. And, like you said, I had my own issues and struggles, which kind of is why I started this thing. But the reason why I wanted to have you on, it's kind of funny, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. Like, you somehow organically get closer with the guys that may be in a little bit more trouble than the average kid, maybe because you have more exposure to them. But, a guy like you, Judge Guy, did you start the Judge Guy networking thing? Did you start that?
No. So the Crusader Business Network, a.k.a. the Judge Guy Network, has existed in many formats over the years. Father Joe Campolone probably formalized it initially, and it was at that time called the Judge Business Alliance, the JBA.
Okay, I remember that.
It's evolved into the Crusader Business Network, and informally known as the Judge Guy Network, which has been organic and has existed since we started graduating guys. It's just sort of a mindset going to Father Judge, and that uniqueness that is the place on Sally Avenue. So and when I say guys who struggled, I think that's more a byproduct of schools just being designed for one type of person. And we know if you've studied education, and I was blessed to as a teacher, there's 12 different types of intelligences according to Bloom's taxonomy. And schools at best address 2 or 3.
Okay.
And so schools really do, particularly boys, a disservice in the way they look and approach education. We're stuck in this old Prussian model that was created to deal with the factory, system that was developed during the Industrial Revolution. And so it was designed to create obedient workers who could follow 2 or 3 tasks.
Right.
And very few schools have evolved to embrace the 12 different types of intelligences, particularly humor, and particularly creativity. And creativity manifests itself in questioning.
Okay, makes sense.
So, when I say kids, who got in trouble, for me, it's not that they were belligerent or they were antisocial or they were kids who couldn't commit to whatever was being asked of them. It's just that schools are designed for 20% of learners, and 80% of the learners are asked to sort of change who they are in order to adapt. And so I think I'm proud to be part of an educational component right now that's changing and adapting to the multiple different learning styles. But I also feel regret for the guys who kind of struggled and were made to feel like school was not their cup of tea, because it's just not accurate.
That's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because like I loved Father Judge from start to finish, like everything about it. All boys school, you could be yourself. You didn't have to worry about girls in the room and all the problems of the bravado that may come about because there's a girl in your class that someone, you know what I mean? So you didn't have to worry about any of that. I made some of the best connections in my entire life from Father Judge. But it's interesting. I wonder, like, you talking about how do you describe it, the taxonomy of learning?
Bloom's taxonomy, 12 different learning styles. So humor is a learning style. I mean, teachers would come down with students and say, oh, I had so-and-so in class and this happened and he said this. And I would say, well, what did you do? Well, I brought him down here. Did you ever think of laughing? I mean, it's really clever. I mean, maybe not appropriate, but certainly clever and intelligent. Maybe, again, not appropriate. But, so I think the good teachers get that. And they try and adapt their delivery to allow for that type of student who isn't just dialed into memorization and synthesis. And
that makes sense. So I'm a student, right? You're an educator. And I always wondered what the hell you guys talk about behind the scenes about, XYZ student. Like, I can't imagine some of the shit talking that you guys do that we do about you. It's got to happen. It's a natural thing. It's human nature, right?
So I was very lucky. When I came into Father Judge, I was taking over for a teacher who was part of this program. It's had many different names over the years, the DeSales program, the Crusader program, where it was basically students in the lower tracks who probably would have been on IEPs had they gone to public schools, but because they went to Catholic schools and we didn't have IEPs or the resources to honor an IEP, they were stuck in these classes. But the ingenuity of the school sort of enlisted some teachers who really enjoyed working with students who were met with challenges in the classroom. Guys like Mr. Mooney,
great guy,
Mr. Green, Mr. Sullivan, Miss Ziegler. And so I was part of that cohort, and we had the same group of students every day. And so we would meet once a week, twice a week, and talk about the students. And yes, there was probably some shit talking going on.
I know we're dumbing it down, but I
can't believe that. So, but at the same time, there really was, I had some success with these particular students on this particular day, and this is how it came about. And we would beg, borrow, and steal from those ideas that would work. And I think that's where education is heading right now. Some faster than others, but I think that's where it's heading.
Yeah, well, and another thing, I mean, even freshman year with Mr. McDonald, right? He was a great guy. I never had him as a teacher. He was what's the class where you just go, study hall guy. But I got in trouble freshman year. I got arrested, and I had to do like 100 hours community service. So I got to report to him every day to clean up trash around the school, and he would knock off 2 hours a day for me, dude.
Yeah.
So the reason why I asked you on is because obviously you've been a big person in my life, and I know I don't utilize our relationship as much as I should, just because sometimes I get all feared up and insecure, and maybe we get into that. But, when you see guys like me in your life as an educator, as a coach, as a judge guy, you know, part of the networking events that we do, how does that affect you personally when you see guys that you totally care about, that you've had a relationship with, you know, struggle with drugs and alcohol? Because listen, you know, you may not know it as much as I do, but drugs were all over Father Judge, just like it was Lincoln High School. There was no difference. You knew who to gravitate towards, and you knew where to get what you wanted. And, you know, I was not involved in that life at school. You know, I was more weekend warrior in high school, but you knew it was going on all the time. Like, how do you combat that as an educator?
So that's a great question. And I'm going to tell a quick story in order to answer it better. I was blessed to work at Father Judge, where I got to work with guys like Duck McDonald, who spanned 6 decades of work. And so I was influenced by them, and they gave me a lot of advice. I also got to work with a gentleman at North Catholic by the name of Ernie Koshnick. And Ernie worked for 50 years at North Catholic as a disciplinarian. Crazy guy. He would hear that there was problems on the L with kids riding the L, and he would dress up like a homeless person on the L and be undercover and have like a newspaper over his head and catch the guys, you know, doing the problem, and then you know, addressing it and saying, okay, this is how we pivot and turn this into a positive, and this is how you get out from underneath this problem. But you know, when he retired, he gave a talk. And he talked about all of the kids that he had to throw out, or all of the kids who didn't live to see graduation. And it was really moving, and it was really profound. And it helped me kind of look at this, that role that I played for 8 years, much differently than I probably would have if I had not been exposed to those 3 or 4 gentlemen. And again, speaking to the idea that schools aren't necessarily designed for every style of learner and every type of adolescent, particularly boys, knowing the struggles that students had, and that just in the classroom setting, which was 7 hours a day, and then the issues that they were part of or brought upon themselves outside of school. The fact that so many of them have turned those struggles into successes and are doing things, not only doing things that we would deem successful, but doing things that they want to do and are really passionate about the things that they're doing. You as a perfect example. That makes me really happy. And it makes me sit back and say, okay, when I got the job as disciplinarian, I was 25 years old.
That's how old you were?
I was 25.
Wow. So it was, what, 98? Because I was a freshman.
99, summer 99. I had just gotten married.
25. When you put it, it's like, the perspective is crazy, just because I'm 41 now.
I was a kid. There were students at Judge who I had taught, whose brothers I went to school with, and had older brothers than me.
Yeah.
So I was really a kid, and I was blessed to be given the opportunity to learn on the fly, because it wasn't like I brought any particular skill set to the job, but I was willing to do it and learn on the fly. But yeah, it's tough to see kids struggle. And again, I use the phrase roll on a stage, because there were times where I'm screaming at a kid where I know that's the last thing this kid needs. He probably needs, you know, a bro hug right now, and not some jackass screaming at him. But to a certain extent, the teachers have that expectation of you, and they're not necessarily wrong in having that expectation of you, because, you know, they want to see a certain sense of order within a school, and repercussions do have a part in progressive discipline and learning from mistakes and things like that. But I often sit back and wonder how I would approach the job now as a 50-year-old person, as opposed to a 25-year-old person. It was half a life ago.
Yeah.
And I think I would be a lot different. I think I would be a lot more understanding. I think society demands you to be a lot more understanding these days.
I can agree with that, just because my daughter is 22, so obviously recent high school graduate a few years ago, and I knew what her experience was like. She went to Benjamin Rush Performing Arts. Totally different experience than I would have at Father Judge, 97 to 01. But I got to kind of see what was available to her as a high school student versus what was available to me. And the reason why I say that, you know, my parents separated, I think, sophomore year. I found out my dad was on heroin, like around junior year, I think. That's what we always knew there was something up, but junior year is when he couldn't hide it any longer. And then they officially got divorced. My mom ended up moving out, and junior year, summer into senior year is when my dad was, you know, it was gone. You know, he would go to work for the most part, but full-blown heroin addict. My sister moved in with my uncle, and I'm still going to school. Right. And I don't know, you're 17.
And we're getting on your case because you're missing your geometry homework.
Well, it's like, so it's hard. Here's the point I'm trying to get to. I didn't know if there was anything available for a person like me at that time to talk about. We had the one, like a bunch of us signed up for this like bullshit thing we could get out of class for and all talk.
Shalom.
Yeah, Shalom. And like I like that wasn't what I needed. But like the flip side is I don't know that I would have ever like communicated with another adult what was going on anyway. You know, like so like what do you do if I was a student today, right? You find out Anthony Galati's parents got divorced, his dad's on heroin, things are not okay. What happens today at Father Judge when you find out about a kid like me?
I'd like to think that we have much more formalized programs for those things. I know that we do. Not being in the classroom these days, I'm not fully aware of the referral process.
Right.
But, you know, I working with guidance to a certain extent, you know, they're referred to guidance or somebody who's aware of the information refers them to the guidance office. We now have more people working in the guidance office, and we have more qualified people in the school who are trained. I think back in the day when you're referencing, you had well-intentioned people,
right.
people who were willing to have a conversation with Anthony Galati or Jason Budd, but might not really be trained in helping the person,
right.
Other than just being a sounding board. And then it gets co-opted because there's 4 or 5 people in there, and there's filters that are put up naturally and unnaturally because in that group setting, people are comfortable sharing what they're comfortable and not sharing.
Right.
So it kind of gets diluted a little bit in terms of what actually is shared and what actually benefits from.
And it's interesting that you say that too, because like I was always a good student. You know, I maintained second honors probably
Very smart kid.
At minimum all 4 years. You know, your parents are going through a divorce, your dad's on heroin, you know, shit's crazy at home. And my wife like still thinks that I don't like handle things the way a normal adult should. I never processed my dad passing away. I don't know. But even at the time I'm going through all this, I didn't give a fuck.
Right.
I'm going to school every day. I'm getting good grades. I was working at Circuit City, cutting lawns on the weekends. I think the abnormal life that my sister and I went through it didn't affect me in a way that I can comprehend today and talk about. It just was what it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I don't even know who I would talk to because I didn't give a shit. I remember I had a religion teacher, I guess it was senior year, that got sick, and then some lady came in and taught the class, and she was as strict can get. And she was going to give me jug for something, and I started fake crying, like, my parents just got divorced, like, my dad's just get out of the jug. And then you walk out, you're like, So like, I don't even know like if I would even take advantage of a program or any of the guidance counselors that could have helped me. And I don't think I'm unique in that sense. There's probably a lot of kids that go through struggles at home and you just never know.
There's probably a psychologist who could draw the conclusion that, well, one, you didn't make it up. Your parents were going through something. You were going through something. You used the word fake cry. You probably wanted to cry, but because you were so macho, you were so tough, you were so strong in every other facet of your life that you wouldn't allow yourself to do that. So here in this, again, a trained psychologist could probably dissect this to a million ways. But yeah, I hear about this. I have other guys that I stay in touch with who talk about things, and if things aren't dealt with at a particular juncture in your life and they're buried, for the lack of a better phrase, it's very common for them to come up and people to work through them at different junctures in your life.
Yeah.
You're going through a juncture right now. You're moving into this entrepreneurial phase of your life. Unfortunately, your dad's not in your life anymore. And so that is a huge transitional phase of our lives that most psychologists don't talk about. Jordan Peterson talks about that quite a bit in a lot of his writings, about maybe the biggest transition a man goes through in life is when he loses his father. And so for you right now, you mentioned, Meg said you're dealing with it differently than other people. Well, I don't know that that's accurate. I get where she's coming from, but I think you're dealing with it the way it's it's because your dad's not here right now.
Yeah.
And so you're mourning on a different level, and you're reviewing all these things that took place 20, 25 years ago as a result of that. And I think that's completely normal.
Yeah, it is. That's one of those. It's a struggle. Like Super Bowl Sunday, you know, I just shared about this at a meeting. Like, I am not grateful that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's great that they won, but I was grateful that my family was here watching the game. I took my nephew to the parade. But Sunday after the gym, you know, I broke down for a little bit because, you know, my dad was alive in 2017 when they won. I wasn't sober in 2022 when they went. So, you know, you don't feel any of the feelings and emotions that, like, for example, that I felt this past Sunday. You know, we put the cardboard cutout next to the TV of my dad, you know, so everybody could see him. And it's like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, those are the things, you know, because, like, I didn't have a relationship with my dad where we said I love you like that all the time, but he was always there. We could talk on the phone for 5 minutes and say 5,000 things. You know, you talk about sports and work. That's what you talk about. You know what I mean? And we had recovery too that we talked about, but I was always out. You know what I mean? It's easy to talk to your dad about recovery when you're in recovery, but you know, for the last 15 years, you know, I had a year and a half sober 6 years ago. Now I have 15 months. So, you know, like I never, you know, throughout the course of my recovery journey, 90% of the time I was out.
Okay.
So it's not like you can talk to your dad about recovery when you're not sober. You know what I mean?
So when you say out, you mean not sober?
Not sober,
Okay.
like, you know, no quality time. You know, you might put a couple, like I had 90 days quite a few times. You know, that's just like white knuckling it, just getting through it. But like, it's such a different day today with my sister and me. Like, you know, I've never been this all in the recovery process. I always got to a point, thought I didn't need certain things, and then would just fail miserably. And then that was just my routine. I would stop going to meetings, stop talking to guys in AA, stop praying, and then you subsequently relapse. But the point of all that is, it's like, you know, you finally pull your life together. Like my professional and personal life had this inverse relationship. It's been like that since day one. You know, I always rise professionally, but my personal life always goes down. You know, and that's just because I'm a really good sneak when I'm drinking and drugging, and my employer never knows. And like, that's another thing I have to deal with. But with now, your career is taken off, your sobriety is it's a quality sobriety, and now your dad's not around to see any of it. You know what I mean? That's what I struggle with.
Okay.
It sucks. It just sucks.
So with the Eagles game was this bittersweet thing for you then?
100% bittersweet because, you know, so for example, you know, he went to the 1980 Super Bowl.
Okay.
Right. He sold shirts with a guy, what ultimately got him tickets to go to the game in New Orleans. Obviously, they lost. But to put in perspective, when they won in 17-18, you know, we watched it at my sister's house. My dad works down the airport. He does heavy highway construction down the airport. So he's always doing road work for like light pockets for the airplanes to land. So he was there when the Eagles flew back from where I think Minnesota, I think the Super Bowl was. So, you know, other than us being born, that was probably the happiest day of his life. And you have this picture of this guy, you know what I mean? Just, you could see that he's like screaming in the picture. And like, that's the picture that my sister and I have. It's, you know, so yeah, it's bittersweet, cool. You know? So, you said you became the disciplinarian at 25, right?
Yeah.
So at what age did you have your kids?
20. So Mara was born in 01.
Okay.
02, excuse me, 02. So I guess, you know, late 20s. Yeah, so she's out of college now, and Brendan is, he's 20. And so those were, you know, I had them both when I was at Judge.
Okay.
And that was a neat experience because they both kind of, before we were in a position to have them teed up for daycare or have family watch them, there were days where we had to bring them to school. And
really?
School was really cool about, you know, here and there, them being there. And so they both grew up in a school environment to a certain extent. And so they had a healthy, you know, appreciation for school and teachers and things like that. And it paid dividends in the end because they're two very different learners and two very different achievers. And so, but having a positive experience at school was very beneficial for us. So
the reason why I asked that, like, you know, the name of the podcast is The Day Before Rehab, obviously. And rehab's this arbitrary term. It could be the day before anything terrible. You know, I had someone on here with cancer, somebody with mental health, somebody with suicidal thoughts. And do you have anything that rings out to you as a day before experience where your life, let me back it up a little bit. True Detective, you ever seen it?
Great. The first season is tremendous. I love the third season. The other seasons were good, but they didn't have that same vibe as the first and third season.
So funny you mentioned that because the second season, Vince Vaughn's in it. And he was a bad guy. And he was talking to a kid whose dad I think he killed. And he said to the kid, that you have a handful of before and after moments in your life where life is never the same as it was before because of this event. You know what I mean? And like these things just pop in my head, like that same thing with the day before rehab. Nothing in my life, I did not wake up October 27th and say I was going to rehab. It was not on my mind, but I went. So my life since that point has never been the same, thank God. Do you have any moments like that in your life?
Oh yeah, they're cliche, I imagine, but certainly the birth of both of my children. Mara was born, and she was, I'm going to say a rather easy birth. I'm sure Laura would have a much different take on it, but she was born. She was walking before she was 1.
Really?
She was walking around at her first birthday party. Every milestone that you worry about as a parent, she had hit, on time or earlier, and hasn't looked back. She's a high achiever and makes us proud. And we used to have to wake up at 1 a.m. We used to have to set our alarm at 1 a.m. just to make sure she still wasn't up doing homework, because if she knew she had a paper a few days, weeks out, she would do it ahead of time. Meanwhile, I was doing my work on the 20 bus heading to school or even in homeroom. But and then when Brendan was born, again, born healthy, but by the time he was 2 years old, he was diagnosed as autistic. And so we had an idea of what, childbirth and development was like, or was supposed to be like. And, when that started bearing in a different direction, that was a profound moment for Laurel and I. And I think her being a nurse and me being in education prepared us well for that, knowing that, having dealt with families over the years, one kid's an AP honors kid, the other kid, is not. And so we knew that those things are what they are. And so, but, with Brendan's diagnosis, it was a change overnight, so to speak. It was a very abrupt change. Obviously, as parents, you can go too far with it, but most of us have dreams and goals for our children. And a lot of times they're manifestations of things we did, or more often things that we didn't do that we want for them, although we probably want it more for ourselves to check that box. And so Laura was an athlete. I was an athlete. She was a much better athlete than me.
Softball, right?
She was karate, soccer.
Oh, okay, soccer.
And so... we both had dreams for both of our kids relative to academics, but certainly also sports. And so, with Brendan, there were just bigger fish to fry, and it wasn't something that was anything we could, focus on. Although we did expose him to sports, and the coaches at the early ages were very welcoming, and he got a little bit out of that. And when it got to the point where being a team and working together and working towards a win, got more important, than he had to kind of step aside, because he was, unfortunately a distraction to that spirit. And so, but now later in life, he has kind of gotten an opportunity to be involved in some, I say non-traditional because they're not things that I grew up with. I grew up playing roller hockey on the street, but he's now playing ice hockey.
Yeah, I remember saying that.
Practice this morning. And so he's doing things that I never would have asked my parents to do. He's surfing. Has surfed with a couple of pro groups over the years for, the Autism Surfers Healing Association. And he rides horses. Again, something that is so far out of reach for the average person because of cost. I mean, you go to one of these stables in Devon, and riding lessons are a couple $100 an hour, not anything Laurel or I could ever afford. But because of his disability, there are agencies out there like Pegasus Therapeutic Riding Academy that provide opportunities for him to be involved in things. But yeah, there are moments that I can remember. I can't remember what I had for dinner last night, but I can remember when Laurel and I got the diagnosis and how, I don't want to say defeated we felt. We certainly didn't feel defeated, but we didn't feel prepared for what tomorrow brought.
Right.
And so we still don't, to a large extent, we're still kind of second guessing ourselves and constantly trying to figure out what we need to be doing in order to make his pathway equal parts challenging so he progresses, but also smooth because we're parents and that's what we're supposed to do.
Right. And because I knew that my dad kind of thought something was up with D'Angelo when he was born, well, not right when he was born, but very soon after that. And then he was diagnosed with autism. And, similar to you, they put him in sports. He doesn't agree with sports that much. You know what I mean? I like they tried jujitsu. Well, he did karate for a little bit. That was okay. And then he started doing jujitsu with Vinny.
How'd that go?
Not well.
Okay.
Not well. He lasted at least a year.
That's great.
But he was a distraction, unfortunately. And I don't know that the coaches are not equipped with that, but they have a class to run, they have a business to run, and I think D'Angelo just kind of was making it a little bit more difficult to coach the classes. And I don't know that he was asked to leave, but I think my sister could read between the lines that this is probably not a good fit for him.
So when Brendan was first exhibiting symptoms that something was wrong, and something was different and abstract, and it wasn't himself, we had seen some things that we thought maybe he had lost his hearing, and I have some hearing problems, and my daughter has some hearing problems, so that would have fit the bill.
Right.
And then it got to the point where we understood a little bit about autism, and it was like we were hoping for him to have hearing issues because with autism, as you know, it's a spectrum disorder. And so every kid is different.
Right.
And every kid can be different on different days. So what works one day for a particular student might not work the next day for a particular student. And so to your point about jiu-jitsu coaches or even teachers who are classically trained in education, it is such a struggle with autism because, again, each kid is different. It's a spectrum disorder, and they just don't have the resources a lot of times to deal with it or even learn about it at this phase, which is really upsetting, but at the same time, a noble challenge.
Yeah, like D'Angelo, he's a math guy.
Okay.
The fucking guy's a wizard. He's in robotics club. He goes to that school at Rowan in Tarsdale. What's he? A sophomore now, and 8th grade in the freshman year. The kid was unhinged.
Okay.
That summer, unhinged because he was so nervous about freshman year, and he gets bullied fucking daily. And it's just a heartbreaking thing. My sister is constantly battling with this school, and they pray on the week. And unfortunately, I'm not immune to that kind of behavior, and that's unfortunate. That's just the way it went. But when you see a kid get preyed on that really doesn't know how to defend himself, you know what I mean? Like it drives you mad. Have you ever dealt with anything like that with Brendan?
I'd imagine he's dealt with it.
Right.
He doesn't share much with us, so unless a teacher brings it to our attention. So it sounds like he's probably D'Angelo is probably in some typical classes from time to time.
Yes.
So Brendan was severe enough that he wasn't in too many typical classes. So most of his class time was spent in a special ed classroom. And so that's a different environment.
Right, I understand.
But he did do some classes where he was immersed, like art, something that wouldn't necessarily be a tracked class, art classes, and maybe some music classes. And yeah, I imagine there's times where he's been bullied, and we've talked to him about that, but he is in a position where he will not tell us anything that will upset us.
He knows that. He knows not to do that.
Yeah, so he has other medical issues other than autism. And so we're constantly asking him about those symptoms, and he'll lie to us and tell us that he doesn't have those issues when he cleared.
Really?
He's had 3 hernias. He's had 3 hernia surgeries. The one hernia he tried to hide from us. When we discovered it, I don't know how he did it.
Really? Just getting through that pain.
The pain that he must have been in, but he spent a decent amount of time in hospitals over the years as a result of either the autism or the epilepsy. And so he just doesn't want to be in the hospital. And so he'll hide things from that from us because he knows it might result in a hospital stay. And so he is kind of conditioned to not tell us things. So that makes it sort of difficult because, we'll go to the doctor and the doctor will ask him questions and we'll have to kind of coach the doctor up and say, he's probably not telling you the truth.
Right.
You got to ask him the same question a couple of different ways. And even then, you're only a little bit closer to the answer. You're not fully at the answer.
Well, and that's how D'Angelo is similar. Like the only reason why my sister would find out that he was being bullied is because she would go through his phone, and she would see text messages that are like that'll break your heart, and it's unfortunate. But anyway, I'll switch gears a little bit. So I wanted to talk to you about this because recovery is interesting, right? So when you're in recovery. And let's just say you're doing the deal. When I say doing the deal, you're going to meetings, you're talking to your sponsor, you're praying. They say that when the shift happens, when you start going closer to a drink rather than away from a drink, they say what happens is you lose your spiritual connection first, right? And then there's a mental shift, and then you physically pick up. And then on the flip side, when you get sober, you regain your physical strength first, then you kind of get your mental faculties together, and then you regain that spiritual connection. So it's kind of like an opposite thing. For me, that holds true. And the reason why I bring that up is the gym and everything about the gym, especially with CrossFit, Jiu-Jitsu, I would never tell my sponsor this, and I know he doesn't listen, but the gym is equally as important to me as AA. Like, I can't do one without the other. If I stopped going to the gym, I would ultimately stop going to meetings and vice versa. So I know you're a gym guy, right, with the Jiu-Jitsu, and we did CrossFit for probably a decade together. How important do you think that is to set the foundation for professional development and spiritual connection and all those kinds of things?
I think it's the most underutilized medicine we have.
100%. 100%.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And you don't need a fancy gym.
No.
I mean, we know this. Your bicep doesn't know the difference between a 20-pound rock and a chrome dumbbell. It just doesn't. Now, one's fancier than the other, and one's more, desirable than another. But the bottom line is your muscles don't know the difference. Whether you go for a run, or you do some, pretty elaborate AMRAP.
Right.
The results are pretty much the same. You feel better afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks. You're dying a lot of times.
Terrible sometimes.
But, and the same with jiu-jitsu. I go and I get my ass kicked.
Yeah.
I don't think in the 3
By
years
like
I've
some
done
17-year-old kid who weighs all of $120.
maybe in 3 years of going weekly, maybe I've won a round.
Yeah. Where do you go?
Martinez on Cotman.
In Frankfurt?
Yeah.
Oh, that's where Vinny goes.
Yeah,
That's
and
where Vinny goes.
it's great.
Yeah.
The people there are just tremendous. They could kill me. They
Yes.
could literally kill me in 10 seconds, and they
Yes.
don't.
Yeah.
But they respect you by
Your
being
effort.
as rough with you as they need to be, and reminding you that they're the alpha, but not killing you at the same time. There's a respect there. Like, if somebody really backed off, I would be upset by that.
I understand.
And really babied me in there. You'd be taken back by that. Like, you don't think I can? But, to have guys who could literally kill you and take it to the point where they're letting you know that physically, but at the same time, they're giving you room to work and improve.
Right, because they want you to learn.
They do.
They want you to learn. From what my experience, and one of my best friends, Brian Weber, he does jiu-jitsu. He said there was an influx of fighters that started going to his gym maybe a year or so ago, and it changed the whole dynamic of the place because they want to fuck you up. They don't want to do what you just said.
Yeah.
They want to fuck you up.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
I get nervous going with MMA guys because I'm afraid they're going to forget where they are. Like
Right.
a black belt in jiu-jitsu who's classically trained in jiu-jitsu, he gets you down on the ground, he's going to work pressure, he's going to work chokes. He's not going to punch you in the face. That's not part of jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So you almost have the ability to kind of catch your breath and rest there, and you're protecting your neck, but you're not protecting your face, you're protecting your neck. And sometimes that means getting an underhook, and sometimes that, but like I worry about those MMA guys because they go right from MMA class to jiu-jitsu sometimes and back and forth. And it's like, the last thing I need is, somebody who knows what they're doing pounding on my face. It's bad enough one day you might get in a fight at a gas station defending your wife or something like that with some guy on the street, but somebody who knows what they're doing is going to ruin you.
You got no shit. Like jiu-jitsu, there's probably other sports, maybe not, but jiu-jitsu is the only sport that comes to mind where a white belt 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000 will never beat a black belt. It's an impossible thing. Wouldn't you agree? Like, it can't happen. Unless you get
only
like
if they take you lightly. Only if they take you lightly.
Well, you know what I mean. Like, if you're sparring and, you know, you got to, like, unless you're like a D1 wrestler who just happens to walk into a jiu-jitsu gym, like, that's a different story entirely. But a guy like me, fresh off the street, just day one, week one, like, you got no shot.
No.
You got no shot.
No. And,
you know?
and if you do, it's because they're letting you work.
Yeah.
You know, they're giving you room to, like, they could get a baseball bat choke on you right now, but they're not because they're going to see, okay, they have the real good black belts have the ability to turn their dial down to just a stripe above you. So if you're a 1-stripe white belt, they're going to roll with you as a 2-stripe white belt.
Right.
And they have the innate ability to do that.
It's pretty impressive.
It is.
Pretty impressive.
It is. And I love rolling with black belts because you're going to learn, or even more so, brown belts, because they're trying to get their black belt.
Right.
And a big component of them getting their black belt is their ability to teach. They have an understand. If you're a 3-stripe brown belt, you know everything that a black belt knows. You just don't have the ability to do it whenever you want.
Right. Okay. It makes sense.
So big part of making that transition from brown belt to black belt apparently is being able to, one, do it whenever you want and counter what another black belt is doing, but also to convey it to lower belts. And so I love working with brown belts. I hate rolling with white belts.
Come on, because they're just like my buddy would call, he calls them boners.
You're in a fight. You know, it's that dude sees you, a fellow white belt, and you're like, I can win.
Yeah.
And you spent the last year and a half getting your ass kicked. You spent the last 35, 50, 100 rolls getting your ass kicked by black belts and blue belts and brown belts. And here's your opportunity to win. So the injuries...
But that's exciting for you too.
Right? There aren't too many less experienced white belts than me.
Okay.
Guys who come in, because I can't get there as much as I'd like. So guys who come in and they're younger than me or they're less experienced than me, they've moved up a lot quicker to blue belts. So in the early days, maybe I could catch them, but now it's tough. I can hold my own versus higher belts if there's sort of a strength differential. So I'm pretty strong for my age, and my weight is certainly not light. So I can use that, especially at our gym, because pressure is a big part of how we roll at Martinez. So I've been taught how to use my body weight and not to shy away from using my body weight and my strength. It's not cheating, so to speak, unless I'm rolling with somebody significantly lighter than me, and at the same and at a lower stripe level than me. So then I'll kind of just try and focus on technique because I need all the work I can get.
Sure,
with
it's like a never-ending process.
Never ending, but it's like CrossFit. Like I got into CrossFit in my mid to late 30s. I'm like, man, I wish I got into this when I was in my 20s. Like jiu-jitsu, I got into it in my late 40s. Like, man, why didn't I get into this at least in my 30s, let alone my late 40s?
I started jiu-jitsu. I haven't done it for probably 4 or 5 years, but I started jiu-jitsu when I was in the best shape that I was ever in, CrossFit-wise. There was no fucking transition. Like it didn't translate to anything I did on the mat. I was out of breath instantaneously. I didn't know how to control myself. Like you said, you're a white belt. You're a fucking boner. It's a fight against another white belt because you don't know what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and you're out of gas in 60 seconds, and you still got 3 more 5-minute rounds to go.
Right. That's like we went and did CrossFit. You had like a strength component. Maybe you had an EMOM to start the class. You had a warm up. You had an EMOM, and then maybe you ended with a 10-minute AMRAP or a 15-minute AMRAP, or whatever. Everything now in my life I think about in 5 minutes. Okay. Like, I'm going to do an ice plunge. I got to do 5 minutes because that's what a jiu-jitsu round is. 5 minutes. I train with the idea of I go out for a run. I'll run at a higher speed than a jog for me that I can for 5 minutes, and then I'll walk for a minute because that's the usual rest period between rounds. But that 5 minutes, there's nothing that can prepare you for that. Yeah. You could do Fight Gone Bad all the time, and it still doesn't compare because the guy you're fighting with is trying to kill you.
Yes.
I mean, not literally, but figuratively. Yeah. He's trying to get you to the point where he's inflicting so much pain and so much fear that you tap out because you're going to die if you don't. And so that mindset is just, you know, you get why guys do the things they do before they come to jiu-jitsu class to prepare for it.
Sure.
Because it's unique.
Well, so the reason why I bring up the jiu-jitsu and the CrossFit and like the physicality that I feel that I need to keep progressing in the right direction, because that ultimately for me leads into me being better at my job, right? So I need the discipline to grind out a workout. Well, and even more than that, like Megan and I, we did a competition after rehab. We have a competition near the March. We're doing the High Rocks. Ever hear the High Rocks?
No.
Oh, it's fucking awesome. It's so it's the same event done internationally at different times of the year. It's 8 1,000-meter runs.
Wow.
And after each run, there's a move like a ski, a row, sled push, sled pull, farmer's carry, lunges, burpee broad jumps, and wall balls. I might be missing one, but so you do the run, you do the move, you do the run, you do the move.
Okay.
So it just changed my whole discipline at CrossFit now. So now I go in, we're following a program and we're doing it. So I need to put things, for me, I put things like that on the board to keep me dialed in physically, but that also translates to me being better everywhere else. Like my job, you try to stay dialed in, as you know. Let me backtrack. I just saw on LinkedIn, did you get a certification from Harvard too?
So executive education on negotiation.
That's pretty cool.
When I worked in the central office, I negotiated the teachers' contracts on behalf of the system. And so my counterpart represented the teachers and I represented the schools in general, the system. And so I was asked to do this role without much training. So
really?
I found this course and we had an amount of money we were allotted every year to get professional development in whatever our area was that we were working in the Archdiocese. And so I asked if I could use that money to go to Harvard and get some training there. So I don't have a degree.
No, I saw that.
But yeah, I have a couple of certifications from there.
So even that like brings home the point even more. Don't you feel like there's a connection between your physical life and your professional development?
Absolutely.
I couldn't be the person I am professionally if I wasn't the person I am outside in the gym with that same mindset. And I feel like I learned all this like at a young age. I couldn't make weight to play fucking football to save my life, right? 6th, 7th grade. You're running with a trash bag for 4 hours, sitting in the coach's truck with a trash bag.
With the heater on.
Oh, dude. For 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. And then my dad hit a home run and he found out that because Consolation, Our Lady of Consolation, didn't have a football team, that I could play for St. Catherine's.
Yep.
And it was like a dream come true.
No more pound ball, right?
Yeah. I was pound ball all my life until 8th grade. It was a dream come true. And the level of competition from Mayfair C playing Holmesburg to St. Catherine's playing Mount Carmel. You're talking about a different world now.
Yeah.
A different world. Yeah. But, like that competitive spirit was always there. And I think like I'm able to use that. Like I'm competitive at work in every sense of the word. Like it's kind of challenging right now because I just started a new job in November, and little backstory, we're a national company, right? We have offices up and down the East Coast, and we didn't have a physical office in Philadelphia, right, up until January 1st. So these guys hired me as part of a 4-person team to build the Mid-Atlantic region, which is PA, Jersey, Delaware, Washington, D.C. We're starting from scratch, but we have the backing of the whole company. So it's not like we're a startup, but we have the feel of a startup just because there's 4 of us. You know what I mean? So it's like we're going to these networking events and we're chasing these jobs and we're responding to proposals and putting bids together. And the competitive spirit in my mind is like it's there. Yeah. For example, we have a big interview at the end of the month with a university. Our company has worked at every Ivy League school except for 2. We have a big interview at the end of the month at a university, and we know who our competitors are. And I'm like chomping at the bit, you know what I mean? Nervous as hell. Like I'm gonna have some sort of speaking engagement at this interview. Like it's what we call.
Are you researching them online?
Oh, we already have the information. I checked all their LinkedIn's.
Talking points relative to them.
Everything. Yeah. So it's a design build project. Are you familiar with those?
I maybe.
So a design build. I'll simplify it. Like the architect and the designer were picked by the university.
Okay.
Then they picked the construction manager. then they design the job. Where normally, if you're walking onto a project, you're a construction manager, you're bidding on a job that you already know what the job is. You already have the documents, maybe the schematic design. You already know what it is. Now you're building the job together. So before even pen goes to paper, there's parameters within that you have to work in. But you're hiring, the mechanical subs, the electrical subs, the plumbers, to design the systems that the university and the design team want to use. So you're doing everything together as like one big collective group. Whereas most jobs, the architect hires the engineer, they design the project. You are awarded the project. You hire the subs to build it. So it's just a larger collaboration. But anyway, we know our competitors. So it's like, how are we gonna fucking stand out in this interview? Our company is huge on design build work, but just not in Philadelphia. They don't know us. Okay. Right. So we met with these guys 3 weeks ago, the university and the design team, as like an informal interview, and like. The higher ups are doing all the talking. But the only thing differently that I bring to the table that they don't is I was at Princeton for 2 years with another construction manager. I was in the fucking thick of it for 2 years. There was 400 guys in the job daily. Yeah. And I walked on the project, right? This is the best. I walked onto the project, 2 of the 8, it was 8 7-story buildings with a central servery and kitchen that connected all the buildings. I walk onto the job. I'm the assistant superintendent, helping one guy manage one building. By the end of the project, I was the second in command, managing all 8 buildings with 3 superintendents and all the carpenters under me. And you don't even know how it fucking happens. Right. You don't even know how it happens. All of a sudden, that's just the way it is. So when I interview with this company now, obviously that comes up. They saw my resume. They saw the university that I worked at. And they're like, we're chasing a project there. We'd love for you to be part of our team. You'll be the lead superintendent. And I'm like, lead superintendent? Like, I'm a fucking idiot. Like, what do you mean? And so you have to like check yourself. Like, you were there. You were in the thick of it. You helped finish the largest project, not only the university ever did, but the construction manager you worked for ever did, as a second in command. Right. So you could do this. Right. And the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because like the competitive nature that takes over my personal life, I try to bring that into my professional life, and all the self-doubt and all the bullshit in my brain, it never goes away, but I don't let it manifest into like open air. Like nobody else knows about it except for me. Do you ever deal with those kinds of things? Yeah, well, I think we all do if we're doing it right. I think there's real value in being competitive in everything. Now, to the extent that it's healthy, again, you go to CrossFit, you get hurt real easily. You go to jiu-jitsu, you get hurt real easily. So what is competitiveness? Well, for me, competitiveness might be if there's an hour worth of work that I'm actively rolling for 30 minutes right now. That just might be where my body is, and knowing that. In my job, right now, I have colleagues that I work with, and they're really high-performing colleagues. They do a tremendous amount of work for the school. It's manifested in the output. It's manifested in donations and things like that. And so I want to beat them. Of course. And it's not simply because I want to beat them because I want to beat them and I want to rub their noses in it or anything like that. That's not the case. I agree with that. Them because I want to be doing what they're doing, and I want to feel like I'm contributing to the group and the greater whole on the level that they are. And so there's that. And then at home, I mean, I think when Laurel and I are in our healthiest shape, it's because we're kind of, he got to the gym today, so I got to get to the gym. Or she got home, she's on the treadmill, and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, I got it. So there's real value, and I think in the modern society they've really tried to tamp down competitiveness, and it's anti-man stuff, because men tend to be a little bit more competitive, but. I don't think that's the case at all. My daughter is tremendously competitive. Yeah, remember her and G did the CrossFit competition together? Yes. They're little kids, man. Yeah, and she, so I'm glad that I, raised her. Same thing. You just start bringing her to class because you can't leave her at home, or you can't, and eventually they get interested in doing it and want to do it themselves and want to get competitive. So yeah, I think again it comes down to. Managing it so it works for you and not against you. Yeah. So taking on too much at work
is the same thing as taking too much on at the gym. You know, you're gonna tear your shoulder, you're gonna rip a bicep, you know, or taking too much on at work. Next thing you know, you're diluting your talent relative to each of the roles that you're playing.
Yeah, you're spread way too
just
thin.
not enough hours in a day.
Yeah. That was Megan's biggest concern with me getting out of treatment. So I started at Drexel for my MBA 3 years ago, went for a year, and then the second year I couldn't stay sober, and I just did a leave of absence. So now I just finished my third year, which is my second. And, you know, you can have your phone at the treatment center I was at.
Okay.
So, you know, my phone, I have my credit card.
Ooh.
So I started emailing my advisor. You know, I had to pay a couple grand to re-enroll. And luckily I emailed them when I did. And this was kind of like what saved me from a fight with my wife. If I did not reach out to them when I did, I was very soon to be passing that 1 year leave of absence. And everything that I've done prior, it just would have disappeared. So I re-enrolled my second week in rehab. I'm in rehab October 28th to Thanksgiving. And classes don't start till January 8th. So it wasn't like I, you know, had to walk out of rehab and go back to class. But, you know, to your point, like spreading yourself too thin, like, you know, you get a couple weeks sober, you know, I'm going to fucking go back to school and, you know, I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to go back to the gym. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to read this amount of books. I'm going to make this amount of money. So that was my biggest problem prior to this relapse. Like I would put all these expectations on my sobriety. They're as unrealistic can get. So what I did differently this time, instead of taking 3 classes, I took 2. You know what I mean? Like just I managed my schedule a little differently, and you know it's worked out so far. So I just finished my second year, and I'm in. You know, this is the first quarter of my third year.
It's awesome.
It's pretty cool. So next quarter I'll take 2 classes, and the following quarter I have 1, and I'm done.
And that's growth right there, because the old Anthony would have tried to take all the classes, get them all done as soon as possible.
And it's impossible. It's just too much. Like my schedule, the way I do it, like right now I'm working from home and the office, so it's a little different. But majority of the class load that I've taken so far, I was on an actual project. So, you know, I get to work at 6 o'clock regularly, like with or without school. So then I would just come in at 5.
Okay.
I would come in at 5, do my schoolwork for an hour, have the next hour to prepare for the day, and that just works for me. So like I just created this balance and this discipline to do well, because you know you want to do well, obviously.
So when you're in class, are you thinking about the gym, or when you're at the gym, are you thinking about work? How are you at compartmentalizing and focusing on, because you have a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah.
And I'm similar in the sense that you know, for me, if I'm at a conference and I'm supposed to be learning about this particular thing, it almost triggers me to think about something else.
Really?
And it's like, I got to reel it in, you know, or you know what? I haven't done Zercher squats in a while. I really need to get them. And so I start writing down my workout. So like I'm all over the place with that stuff. How are you with that?
So first off, the gym. When I'm at the gym, everything else in my brain is shut off. You know, I don't think about anything, which is great. And I think all this that I'm about to say is all because of the recovery program that AA has given me. When I'm at work, I'm at work.
Okay.
You know, I maybe once in a while I'll know I have an assignment, and that might creep into my brain. Like, man, you got to fucking tackle this assignment. You're at work. You got to go to the gym after. Like, so that does happen. But as far as the compartmentalization, it's been so easy for me this time. And I think it's all because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, I'm constantly. Like I do the same things every day, the same things. I wake up, I pray, I go to work, I go to the gym, I go to a meeting, and in that time frame, I'll put an hour aside for schoolwork. And you might know this as much as anybody. You know, an MBA. My fucking daughter can get an MBA right now.
I don't, you know, I'm sure she can, but what I'm saying is don't downplay it.
Well, yeah, I do that a lot. But it's way easier than I had anticipated. You know what I mean? So the whole school component that I'm added to my life after treatment, it's like, it's not that hard.
Well, again, you were a very intelligent kid and you were dealing with a lot and you were trying to add more on your plate, which wasn't always the best. Not only were you adding more on your plate, but you weren't exactly adding the right things onto your plate. Yeah. So like, you think about what you went through and the fact that you are in as good a position as you are, that doesn't happen by accident. You had a level of talent, cognitive talent, that you often don't give yourself credit for. So I imagine there's plenty of people who think getting an MBA is almost impossible, especially if they're working full time, they have a family, and they have a passion like this that they're working on. I'm sure you think about this hours a day, how to improve it, how to grow it, where you want to go with it, what you want to do with it, the impact that you want to have. So that probably eats up a significant portion of your day. So the fact that you're able to go to the gym and focus on the gym. I think the gym is one of those things where you can't focus on anything else or you're going to get hurt.
Especially now with CrossFit.
You can daydream at work and you not necessarily get hurt unless you're working on an I-beam, then, you really shouldn't daydream. But, so I think it's great that you're working on your MBA. What's your goal for it when you finally get it?
Here's the most beautiful part about what the goal was compared to what it is today. In construction management, most often you see assistant project managers go to project manager, then the senior project manager, then the project executive, and then maybe senior vice president. You never see a field guy get past the highest level of superintendent, which is the general superintendent. You can not have higher education and go from a carpenter to an assistant super to senior super to general super. You can do that. But getting past that level, I've never seen it happen for a field guy, a carpenter, you know what I mean, by trade. So I thought to myself that the reason I went to get my MBA is, you know what? I'm going to break the mold. I'm going to be the field guy that gets to the executive level. And how I'm going to do that is by keep doing my job well and get my MBA to get past the general superintendent position to like maybe director of operations. And here's the crazy part. This company hires me and they've done what they're doing in Philadelphia, in Miami, in LA, and actually Arkansas. They break into a market, they get multiple projects, and they grow, and their revenue goal is maybe $30 million for the year, ends up being $100 million for the year in 5 years. So what that means is we'll have multiple projects going at once, multiple superintendents on multiple projects going at once. So there's going to be the need for a director of operations in this area. So when I interviewed with these guys, I don't think the MBA on my resume with the expected graduation date had anything to do with the hire. It was really the higher education work that I've done in the past 5-6 years. But as we continue to grow and build in this area, the plan is for me to move up to the person that manages the superintendents, which would be the director of field operations. That was my goal when I originally went back to get the MBA. And in my mind, it was like, I'm just going to create a pathway for me to get to the next level past the superintendent position. And, it's kind of it's been laid out for me at this point if what we're trying to accomplish in the Mid-Atlantic region happens.
Cool.
So that's been my goal. That's awesome. It's pretty crazy. But you said it earlier, I don't give myself enough credit. It's impossible for me. It's just so hard to do.
Well, it's that balance between discipline and humility, which are tremendous buoying factors in our life. The more disciplined and the more humble we are, there's real value in that. But at the same time, it's like, well, how do we manifest the right level of humility so that we're not overly critical of ourselves? Right. And I talk to my daughter about this all the time. A lot of what I've read recently says your body and your brain don't know the difference between joking and seriousness when it comes to self-talk. Okay. So if you're verbally or internally hypercritical of yourself, you sort of adopt that tone internally, physically and biologically. Mm-hmm. And I guess a great example of this is gratitude. I'm sure gratitude is something that they talk about tremendously in rehab, and how there's an immediate biological response the minute you express some level of gratitude for something. Mm-hmm. And so if you could make yourself feel better by every morning writing down 3 things that you're thankful for, which I try and do every day on this little app that I have, and they're almost always the same thing. They're either a family or my job or something like that, some iteration of that. But if you can be thankful for yourself in a certain way, the sky's the limit in terms of the biological feedback that you get, the dopamine rush that you get from that. And so now you're starting your day on that high note. So, you feel that you've gotten, I imagine you feel you've gotten to where you've gotten right now because you've been willing to be critical of yourself and address those things that you were being critical of. And so you're reluctant probably to reward yourself with some positive self-talk because you're like, oh, okay, I can't get away from being critical of myself. And so
it's so I'll tell you a funny story. So I've been with this company since November. 2 years ago, I left the company to go to a new company. And as I'm starting the new job, Megan and I, we meet this guy down the shore. He works for a really big time construction manager in North Jersey. And we're just talking, and he's like, I know you just started a new job. I think you'd be a great fit for this job. And I'm like, I have a job. I'm not going to take this job. He's like, look, just talk to my bosses, hear them out. So I do some research on the company. I talked to two guys that were at Princeton with me, one of the subcontractors, great guys, carpenters. One was the general foreman and then his boss. So they both vouched for me to the construction manager I'm going to speak with and another guy. And I say to Megan, I'm like, I'm a fucking idiot. Like, why do they even want to fucking talk to me? And she's like, well, they can't all be wrong.
Right. Good point.
So just that comment alone, I'm like, man, you got a point. So I'm doing better with it. Perfect example. We just had a networking event last week in Jersey at some golf club, and I walked in there and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna fucking do it. I'm just gonna be me, start to finish. And it was like I made a conscious decision to be myself, to talk, to engage with other people about what our company is doing, what our goals are, and it was like the best experience I ever had. You know, people are like complimenting me to my face in real time as we're discussing our goals, their goals, what could potentially happen in the future. So I'm getting better with it.
Good.
But the criticism, the self-criticism is it's
healthy, but too much, like anything else, too much of it.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know if you're familiar with the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sure you've heard of them.
So, yeah, some of them.
So I just did a couple steps with my sponsor a couple weeks ago. One is like you basically make a list of you're basically making a list of all the negative aspects of your life, and then you talk to your sponsor about it. And the theme of all my issues were fear, self-doubt, insecurity. And as we're discussing these things, you know, I know that I think them, like the fear, the self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily manifest itself into reality.
Okay.
You know, like, you know, I have went on these big time job interviews. I've gotten these big time jobs. I decided to go back and get my MBA. I'm doing well. I do well at the gym. My marriage is good. So like all the negative self-talk, it's there. Mm-hmm. It's not like all the time, but it never really holds me back. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so that's humility.
Yeah, it's humility.
So it's more humility that you're okay. I'm tempering where I am right now, and so that's healthy.
But every once in a while, you know, it comes out. You know, the ego, like at the gym, right? The gym's the best. So I always joke around. Like we just had a competition in the summer, and my running joke is, my best is better than your best. Just fucking watch. You know what I mean? It's like, and I say it to my wife. You know what I mean? So we just joke, but it never comes out maliciously or like, right. Fuck you. Like, but so, we talked about the physical, right? We talked about how that can kind of help with professional development, and now my sobriety has shown me that my spiritual connection kind of ties everything together. I mean, you're Catholic, right? I'm sure you pray. I'm sure you're religious, like in your own way. And my spirituality, when I say spirituality, like, I have a connection with my higher power that I learned that, it just was dormant all this time. I just, I believe in the God that I grew up with. Like, I don't need to overcomplicate it. That's what I believe in. And my connection to my higher power, I see it all the time. I pray in the morning, I pray at night, and I'm thanking him constantly. I tell him what I'm grateful for. And, I think that kind of is like the glue that holds everything else together for me. And I mentioned it earlier, like that's the first thing that leaves you en route to a relapse. So I try to maintain the spiritual connection, like every day. I do certain things every day to stay connected to my higher power. And like, it really keeps everything grounded for me to be able to keep doing all the things that I'm doing.
I think that's a really mature conversation. I don't think that's a conversation we could have had when you were 15.
No.
It takes a level of maturity. It takes success. It takes failure in order to have that. I've worked for the Archdiocese for 30 years. So obviously, I have to have some level of faith relative to my Catholicism, which I do. It's not something I talk about a lot. And at times, I guess I probably take it for granted more than anything, because it's like, oh, okay, well, this is what I do all day. And I'm not really overly conscious about it in terms of talking with others and things like that. But it's something, as I've gotten older, that I've thought about a lot more deeply. And just things, when I meet guys that, again, we're at Judge and we've had whatever relationship we've had relative to whatever role I played at the time that I met them, whether it was teacher or coach or disciplinarian. I'm always proud if there is still a level of faith involved in their life. And obviously there are these, boxes that we all grew up with that need to be, are you going to mass every Sunday and things? And so those are markers, and those markers are never going to go away. But, it's much more than going to mass on Sunday. I've known some people who go to mass every Sunday, maybe even every day. They were really good people, well, And so to say that, their faith is what defines them, like, oh, okay. So, there's people, when we went to CrossFit, what was the sign over the door? It was the direction of intention from North Catholic.
That's
the
right.
Same one that was at Judge. And it's like, I talk to people all the time at Judge, and I said, there are guys out there, there are meatheads, just total meatheads who probably lived in Jug. And what they do on their own time, we probably don't want to know about, but they're praying the direction of intention before a heavy lift.
Yeah.
I said, so it has some connection. It weaves itself through our lives somehow. It might not be as strong as others want it to be. It might not be as classical as going to mass every Sunday, but there is something spiritual about most of us who've gone through Catholic school, and it might ebb at times throughout our lives, and then it comes back in full force. So
yeah.
So you were saying earlier that you pray. Like, is that just like classically praying, or are you meditating, or are you just focused thinking on things?
Two different ways that I do it. I say 2 prayers that I've learned in AA, and then I talk to God. And I do the same thing at nighttime when I go to bed.
Okay.
I say the same 2 specific prayers, and then I talk to God, and then I go to bed. And like this, I don't even think that these words came out on the podcast before, but it's what makes me feel connected with like a spiritual purpose. You know what I mean? It's like I learned in AA, they call it the gift of desperation. And I experienced the gift of desperation, the 2 weeks leading up to rehab. I was burning my life to the ground. I was the lead superintendent on a project. I couldn't go to work sober. My marriage was falling apart. My daughter was disgusted by the way I would speak to her. My mother-in-law wanted to kill me. And I was so broken. And you put it in perspective, I'm in my, shore house in Margate by myself, something that I worked so hard for. Everybody hates me, right? I've ruined almost every relationship in my life. And my sister just sends me a blind text like, bro, I think it's time you go away. And I'm on my knees in my bathroom like, yeah, I'm done. And what I've learned is, that story, there's a lot more to it than that. But what I've learned is that experience is what they call the gift of desperation. I was broken.
Okay.
I was broken spiritually. I had no soul. 15 months and 2 weeks later, I can't even believe I was acting the way I was acting. And it's only right around the corner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I have the most beautiful wife on the planet. My daughter is absolutely amazing. I love my mother-in-law as much as my own mom. And my sister and I were connected on every level. And all those relationships were gone. And the horrible part about it all is, in my business, in my field, you can get high and go to work and still do well. And that was the trick. My dad would always say, don't believe the lie. I would be like, Dad, I'm good, man. Like, my job's good. I don't give a fuck about anything else. And he would say, don't believe the lie. My boss came to my job the day I told him I had to go to rehab. I did something in the bathroom. I walk out of the trailer. It's my fucking job. I'm running this shit. He walks in 3 seconds after I walk out of the bathroom. I'm like, oh, shit. we walked the whole project, and he's like, "Oh man, you're doing great. Keep up the good work." 12 hours later, I call him in tears that I got to go to rehab.
I remember you telling a story on one of the first podcasts.
Yeah, it was so. We're talking about the spirituality part of it all, like the gift of desperation. I thank God every day that I wake up and I don't want to drink or use drugs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like there was such a long period of my life where I felt the same way, but I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
I just couldn't stop. And like I'm a death of a thousand cuts kind of guy. You know what I mean? I'm not doing so much that's so obvious that everyone around me can see, and that's kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it worse than like having a lower bottom, but it was the biggest trick that the devil played on me, having me think that I was okay, you know, just because nobody knew. You know what I mean? Like, here's the worst part about it all. My dad and my sister always knew when I was not sober.
Okay.
And I got to keep it from my wife. And I got to make sure they don't tell her. So that was my life forever.
Yeah. And that was an adventure.
What is it?
So that was an adventure.
That's a funny way to put it.
Not in a classical sense, but
that's a funny way to put it.
Well, I talk about him all the time, but Jordan Peterson, he talks about people who've been in rehab, and it's like, well, why do you drink alcohol? Well, that's a pretty stupid question. I'm using his words. It's like, because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
You know, so when you move away from that, you got to replace it with something that's equally as engaging and great. And so you need to find some adventure. So you're on the adventure of your life. I mean, whether it's the gym, your professional life, your personal life, you know, you've built this amazing personal life, and now at school with your MBA. So, I mean, I guess the trick is finding the adventure in the calm, in the peace, because you're a guy that's got to have
something,
multiple irons in the fire. It's not enough to have one iron in fire. You got to be doing 6 different things at once to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So are you finding yourself having that peace in the calm? Like today, when we're done here, are you able to sit and just watch TV and chill, or take the dogs for a walk? Or
so the beauty of doing the podcast on Sunday, one, it works out with Megan's schedule, and two, it's a great day for me to do it because Sunday is the only day of the week where, other than the gym, I have nothing going on. So to having conversations like this with people like you and others, you know, when you're done, you're tired, you're exhausted. You know, we're sharing like ideas for over an hour about life and this and that, and so I have gotten better in the past. Well, so we back it up a little bit. When Trump got shot in July, had nothing to do with that, but on that day, I wanted to drink. Okay. It just so happened that I remember the day because, and that was the first and only time since leaving treatment that I was committed to drinking.
It was like a Saturday, right?
Yeah, it was a Saturday. And I think the calmness and the complacency, like I was still doing all the things. I was going to the gym. I was praying. I never missed meetings, but something inside me had no joy. Like I was like joyless. I think I forget the name this guy told me what it was called, to be in a state of mind where you experience no joy. But anyway, I couldn't deal with the calm. I couldn't deal with the tranquility of the day. And since that moment, I prayed about it. I went to meetings. I talked to my sponsor about it. You know, I still struggle with the downtime here and there, but you know, it's gotten better. You know what I mean? Megan and I will just hang out, get some food, watch TV, and then we'll go to bed. And I think the Sunday scaries are going to be something that's always part of my life. I think I've learned to accept it and not have it crush my soul like it used to. You know, for example, like when I manage a project, I'm the last person to leave on a Friday. I know everything that has went on that day.
Yeah.
I know everything that has to go on Monday. But Sunday, I'm fucking filled with anxiety. Yeah. Like something is going to go wrong. And like what I've learned from some of my mentors are, you know, very simple. Did somebody die today? No. Well, then it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of extreme.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not that deep. It's not that deep. So like I'm getting better with the anxiety on Sundays. But that's why I do the podcast on Sunday because, you know, you gym, podcast, you feel productive for the day, and now you can shut it off after. So.
And in watching your podcast, I get the impression that this is very therapeutic for you.
Yeah, it's great. You can't have a recovery podcast and relapse. You know what I mean? So no, but so these stupid things that I would put in my head, Megan and I would discuss, like it's just an added layer of accountability for my own recovery.
Sure.
You know, if anyone can learn something from what we discuss and some of the people that I've had on, you know, that's a benefit. Right. You know, but they say in AA sometimes that, you know, it's a selfish program. You know, like if you work with another alcoholic, yes, you're helping that guy, but it's really keeping you sober for that day.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's how I look at it.
I think as a society, we've gotten away from these conversations. And I think that's why podcasts have taken off as such a popular medium in the last 5 years, because there's a real appetite for long form conversation, especially amongst men. I mean, because I think you look at society and social media and texting, and if you could call a person, you could call a person. If you could text them, you probably text them before you call them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, a lot of this has grown out of the idea, okay, well, people's attention span is what it is. And so we have to cater to that. And then, you know, you have something like Netflix or HBO Max, where somebody can watch 20 hours straight of Game of Thrones with, and again, I'm stealing from Peterson. It's like 20 hours straight of Game of Thrones with 300 important characters and 20 different subplots. And people can follow that if it's entertaining, it's engaging. And so here we are, and, you know, you mentioned Trump being shot, and certainly there's a polarizing figure. And, you know, there's people that who go out of their way to not have conversations at Thanksgiving dinner, because conversations are hard to have now.
Right.
Everything kind of gets lumped into one or two categories, and people are at polar opposites, whether it's politics or even sports. Right. And so I think, you know, the more that people can have these long form conversations, the more our kids in school can have these. So COVID hits, and we were positioned well because we had created a digital platform for weather-related purposes, snow purposes.
Right.
So that if we were out of school, kids could get a day's worth of work in and get credit and not have to make the day up in May. So flash forward to, you know, 2020, whatever it was, and we didn't have any snow days. But then the state got shut down because of COVID. And so we had a platform to continue education. Other schools didn't. We were pretty lucky. But then coming out of COVID, teachers and students were reluctant to let go of the online work, the laptop learning. Teachers could say, well, you know, my kids, I've been infusing technology into the classroom. That's a good thing. They're preparing for a world of technology. But at the same time, they're not dialoguing and arguing with people. I mean, you can remember probably the most vivid memories in school were conflict. You know, arguing with a teacher. There's real value in that, real value in having conversations. And so for you to see you have these conversations with other people, you know, you're having an argument, so to speak, with those demons.
Yeah.
You know, it's just manifesting itself in a friendly conversation with you and whoever your guests were. I mean, that's what was it was so neat to watch you and Rich have the conversation that you guys had, because like I knew some of the backstory. Yeah. You know, and and I knew where it was coming from, and I knew how easily it could be for you guys not to be in the position you're in right now. Yep. And so I think the more we can have these kinds of conversations and get kids into a position where they're having conversations, uncomfortable conversations, where they're arguing their point or being told that their point doesn't make sense, I think there's growth in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the first books I read in college back in like 08 or 09 when I went back was Unequal Childhood, I think it's called. Okay. You ever hear of it?
No.
They talk about raising your kids with concerted cultivation versus natural growth, and how middle and upper class obviously are more concerted cultivation. The more activities, the better. The more schedules, the better. The more engaging with adults, the better. And then natural growth is, you know, maybe lower class or working class, where you don't have you can't afford the certain different avenues that the middle class do. So like, you know, you have one kid who might be playing 4 sports a year, his schedule's dialed in day one, and you might have another kid over here, they're making up games outside with their friends.
Improvised play.
Yeah, and there's there's benefits and advantages and disadvantages for both.
Absolutely.
And how that shapes you as an adolescent into, you know, adulthood. So I think it's kind of like, to your point,
absolutely
ties everything together. But the one thing I want to say is Jordan Peterson, you mentioned him a few times. I love Jordan Peterson. And one of his clips, it's like one of my favorite. He talks about getting to the pinnacle. And when you get to the pinnacle, you can't stay there too long. You can look around. You can look around and see that you're at the pinnacle, but your next move needs to be the next pinnacle. So my wife and I, we are polar opposites in that regard. You know, what's going to happen after you get MBA? What's going to happen after you get the next position? Well, we're going to keep going.
Right.
Because that's what makes me me. And she thinks I'm fucking nuts. And she's right to some degree. But the Jordan Peterson version of that, when he describes that, is way more articulate than me. But the point is, getting sober has given me one more shot at this life, and I'm going to max it out. Whereas before I got sober, I was ready to max it out to the ground. So now we're going to go the opposite direction. That's the point of it. That's the point of it all.
Yeah, I agree. And she's right. I mean, because she's just looking out for you.
Well, she's seen the worst side of me.
Well, she doesn't want to see you get eaten up by this compulsion to climb the next mountain.
Yeah.
You know, I thought of the saying that when you were talking, after the mountains, there are more mountains. You know, you get to the top of one, and off in the distance, well, I didn't climb that one yet.
Right.
So, but it doesn't have to be academic. It could be, you know,
anything.
It could be back to jujitsu, or it could be, you know, any.
That's why we're doing the High Rocks. It's just another goal. It's just another thing. It doesn't have to be more or less than a current goal. It just needs to be something attainable that you can shoot for. That's how I look at it.
The adventure.
Yeah.
Replacing it with the adventure.
Well, Mr. Bud, we've been going for an hour and a half. The dogs are getting crazy. I still call you Mr. Bud. One thing I'll end on.
I've been called worse.
So I call my father-in-law Mr. Maloney.
Okay.
I've been with Megan almost 10 years, and probably like 6 years ago, he comes up to me and he's like, Anthony, call me Don. I'm like, no fucking way, Mr. Maloney. So it's Mr. Bud. So
yeah, and I know you mean it as a sign of respect.
Absolutely.
So I'm grateful for
well,
that.
Well, like I said, you've always been an authority figure. I'd like to think of us as friends now, but that's your name, man. That's your name.
It's funny. We were walking up from Temple graduation. I forget what year it was. And we're walking up that ramp to Broad Street, and a kid who had been in the discipline office for, you know, every other day for his entire 4 years, he ran up behind me and he patted me on the back, and he goes, "Hey, Jason." And I said, "You suffered through hundreds of days at Jug to graduate to call me Jason. You could have called me jackass. You could have called me shit."
Anything.
I did that. No. Now it's Jason. Now you have to call me Jason the rest of your life. So
that's great.
But I'm grateful to be part of your journey. You've been very open and honest with me beyond this podcast about what you've been up against and the challenges. And I've had so much faith in you, whether it was clouded by me yelling at you at times, or you know, just know that it was me wanting more for you at the time. And I've had all the trust in the world in you as you've been in my home, you've worked on my home, you know, you've been around my kids, our daughters, like you said, have competed. I'm just so proud of what you've done and where you've come from, because I know it hasn't been an easy journey. And I'm really excited about what's to come for you, because I think the sky is the limit, brother.
I appreciate it, man. Mr. Bud, thank you. This is great. Can't thank you enough. And that's it.
I guess I want to end it this way.
Love you, bro.
Yeah.
We love you, Dad.
I love all of you.
We love you, daughter.
I love you too.
Wow, that was nice.
And I tell you what, let's go back!